Probably you have noticed that your parents sometimes gives you some guidelines or instructions such as you don't need to go out after 7 pm, you need to take your dinner by 9 pm, you need to sleep by 10 pm, you need to wake up by 6 am, etc. There are dozens of such guidelines. Almost every one of you gets such guidelines by your parents. But these are not strict in nature. I mean, if sometimes you violate, most likely you do not face any negative consequences. But yes, if your parents come to know, then they will definitely just recall you about those instructions and no special punishment as such. That means it is liberal in nature, and more importantly, it is not an order. But the most important point that you need to focus on, it is true that it is liberal in nature, but it does not mean that you can keep violating it. Not at all. So guys, what does it mean and why am I talking about it? Any guess? Okay, I tell you. In today's session, we are going to discuss about this concept only. That is Directive Principles of State Policy. As you can see, the meaning is hidden in the name itself. That is directives, which means guidelines. Now, you can correlate it with the guidelines that your parents give you. The nature is literally same. However, the only difference is your parents designs guideline for you, and similarly Indian Constitution designs guideline for the central government as well as for the state governments. It is mentioned in part 4, article 36 to 51 of the Indian Constitution. So guys, before start discussing the topic, I want you to know brief about the points that I will be discussing in this video. First one is meaning and concept of directive principles. Second, features of directive principles. Third, purpose of directive principles. And fourth, types of directive principles. Let's begin with the concept of directive principles. Directive principles are the bundles of people's objectives, ideas or aspirations which union government as well as state governments must keep in mind while making laws or formulating policies for the governance of the country. After independence, our forefathers' idea was to make India a welfare state incorporated in the constitution. They believed that this can only be achieved if the state endeavored to implement it with high sense of moral duty. Further, as it is mentioned in Article 37, that directive principles are non-justiciable in nature, which means they are not legally binding by any courts. However, they are fundamental in the governance of the country. They lay a code of conduct for legislatures, executive and administrators of India to discharge their responsibilities in tune with these ideals. So guys, what did you get from this description? It seems that some of you are confused. I tell you in few words. Directive principles mentioned in our constitution are guidelines. Very simple to understand. Secondly, as these guidelines are non-justiciable, so they cannot be implemented forcibly. Okay? Thirdly, though these guidelines are not enforceable, still central government and state governments discharge their responsibilities in tune with these ideals. Now moving on to the next topic, that is features of directive principle. So the very first one is directive principles of state policy has been taken from Irish constitution, that is the Constitution of Ireland, but originally copied from Spanish constitution. Second, directive principles are mentioned in part 4, article 36 to 51 of the Indian Constitution. Directive principles are non-justiciable in nature, and the purpose to keep it non-justiciable is state may not have enough resources to implement these ideals, or it may even come up with some better and progressive laws. Lastly, directive principles incorporate a comprehensive economic, social and political guidelines or principles for the modern democratic state. Now moving on to the another topic, that is purpose of directive principles. The first purpose of directive principles is to ensure that the state shall strive to promote welfare of the people by securing a social order. Second, the state shall strive to minimize the inequalities in income and endeavor to eliminate economic inequalities as well as inequalities in status and opportunities without any discrimination. Now moving on to the fourth and last topic, that is types of directive principle. So major types of directive principles are first, economic and social principles. Let me tell you, majority of directive principles are socialistic and economic in nature. That is, they are dedicated to achieve social and economic welfare of the people with the aim to establish India as a welfare state. So, let's see the major articles of this category. Article 38, 39, 39A, 42, 43 and 43A. Now moving on to the second type, that is Gandhian principles. During the freedom struggle, the ideologies that Gandhiji had practiced or asked his followers to pursue, that assimilated in the directive principles. So major articles of this category are Article 40, 43B, 45, 46, 47 and 48. Now moving on to the third type, that is international peace and security. To promote international peace and security, the directive is enshrined in Article 51 of the Indian Constitution. It also strives to maintain honorable relations with all other nations. Now moving on to the fourth and last type, that is liberal intellectuals principles. We will also call it as miscellaneous directive principles because it includes general principles. And the major articles of this category are 44, 48B, 49 and 50. This is all for this video. In my next video, I will discuss the relationship between fundamental rights and directive principles and also the implementation of directive principles of state policy. Likewise guys, before I say bye-bye, let's check out what we have discussed in this video in brief. First, directive principles of state policies are guidelines to the central government as well as to the state government that they have to keep in mind while making laws or formulating policies. Second, it has been taken from the Irish Constitution but originally copied from Spanish Constitution. Third, it has been mentioned in Part 4, Article 36 to 51 of the Constitution. And last, that is the types of directive principles. First, social and economic principle. Second, Gandhian principle. Third, international peace and security. And fourth, liberal intellectual principles. Thank you and bye-bye.